webinar here was built around the concept of portrait retouching, primarily because we have a brand new product in Perfect Photo Suite 6, and that is called Perfect Portrait. So let's go ahead and I'm going to launch Perfect Photo Suite, which is a standalone product. It also works in Adobe Lightroom as well as Photoshop and Apple Aperture. But if you don't have any of this, any of these products, you can just use it by itself. And I've got a bunch of portrait images here that I like to work on, and we'll go through some of how I do my portrait retouching when I actually work on images. So you can see here are my images. I'm going to take this one, I'm going to double click on it, and it's going to launch Perfect Photo Suite. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to send it over to Perfect Photo Suite, or rather to Perfect Portrait by clicking on the Portrait module selector. And by doing that, we're going to send the image to Perfect Portrait, and Perfect Portrait's going to start looking for faces. And when it finds a face, it's going to do a few things. It's going to first put a bracket around the face. So you see this white bracket over here? That means that a face was detected, and you can see over here on the right, under the faces layer stack, there is a face. So if there were multiple faces, each face would be detected and put on its own layer. Now, the other thing that it does is it starts correcting for color casts. It's going to look at the average color of the skin based on what face was detected, and it's going to remove any extraneous colors. So you can see here, if I go to the Advanced tab of Perfect Portrait and I go to the Skin Tune palette, if I turn it off, you can see the original image without the color correction. And by turning it on, you can see that the color is a little bit more realistic. Now, there are a few things on top of the face detection and the skin tune that Perfect Portrait does automatically, and you can see them here. You can see that the blemishes slider is jacked up and the smoothing slider is up. The same thing goes for the facial features section, meaning we're adding some whitening to the eyes and whitening to the teeth. Personally, for me, whenever I work on any image, whether it's a portrait or a landscape or architecture or anything, and I'm stylizing it or I'm correcting it, I do not want the software to do anything for me. I want to start at a zeroed out baseline. So what I'm going to do is I want to start off by showing you how I start off my portraits. And that is by zeroing out all of the settings. And there's a cool way to kind of automate this process. And I'll show you how to do that right now. So by zeroing out, what I want to do is under Skin Retouching, I'm going to take the smoothing slider and the blemishes slider to 0. I'm going to turn off the skin tune. And then under facial features, I'm going to bring the strength to 100 and then the whitening and clarity to 0. And then I'll repeat the process for the mouth. Strength to 100, whitening, vibrance to 0. So right now, this is the original image. Now, in Perfect Portrait, you can save any snapshot of these sliders as a preset. So let's do this. Let's go to the Presets menu at the top, and then let's go to Save Preset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this preset Zeroed Out. I'm going to put it in a category here by adding new category, and I'm going to type Brian's Portrait Presets. I'll type my name as the creator, so it's just Brian Matiash, and then I'll say use this preset to zero out, if I can type, all sliders. Create. Now, if I bring up my presets bar, which is, you can do that by clicking on this little icon on the bottom right here. It brings up the preset bar. And then if I go to the presets folder, there's my preset folder that I created, and there's my zeroed out. So watch. Let's cancel out of here just for a second. Let's cancel out and let's go right back into Perfect Portrait. So once again, Perfect Portrait is going to start finding a face, and it does. And you can see it went through and it automatically made changes for me, which is great. It's a good starting point. But if I go back to the presets folder and then double click on my zeroed out preset, what it's going to do is it's going to start resetting everything. And so you can see everything is zeroed out again, which is good. Now I'm free to start working. So for the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the preset bar since I no longer need it. And now I have more screen real estate. The first thing that I do, and this is kind of, again, my personal workflow. The first thing that I do is I refine the masks. So when Perfect Portrait starts looking for faces, it's actually looking for the skin of the face, as well as the eyes and the mouth and teeth. And so what I want to do here is, Terrence is saying in the preset, why is Skin Tune still on? Skin Tune is one of those, is a feature that does not get captured. It'll automatically turn on. What would get captured are the sliders. I just need to toggle this actually for some reason. So what would get captured, everyone, is if I added warmth to the image or if I adjusted the color shift, those would get captured, but the on-off would not. That would always turn on. So let's go ahead and let's start processing the image. And I was saying that we have the masks for the skin, the eyes, and the mouth. And you can see here, you see these tools on the top left? This is our tool well. And we built this tool well in a specific order. It wasn't just random. This is the order in which we recommend working on portraits. So the first tool that we have is the retouch brush. So the retouch brush is great because if you have certain problem areas that you want to zap out, you'd use the retouch brush, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to bring up the inspector. So the inspector is that little eye icon. I'm going to put the window over here. And you'll use the inspector if you want to adjust the brush size and the feather and the opacity. And so I'm going to make my brush pretty small, and I'm just going to start drawing on certain areas here that I want to heal out on her forehead. And actually, to make it a little bit more compelling, let's do a side-by-side preview. So let me just move this out of the way here. So on the left is the original, and on the right is what we're retouching. So what I'm doing is, you can see I'm just kind of zapping away certain areas here to clean the skin. And I'm not going to get too aggressive. You know, she's got nice skin to begin with, but we're just kind of giving it a little helping hand. Now, one of the nice things about the retouch brush is if I bring the opacity of that brush down to 0, or not to 0, to about 20, and draw in areas like under the eyes, it does a nice job of kind of brightening that area and softening it. So if you have like dark bags under your eyes, or you have a lot of lines that you want to minimize, just drawing a few times on it, it really does a nice job of softening the area. And so same thing here, we can kind of make a smaller brush there and just kind of softening those lines. Not removing them, because these lines are important, everyone. These lines give structure to the face. But there's nothing wrong with adding a little bit of, softening, a little foundation. Now there was a question do you want to turn Skin Tune off? If you you'd want to turn Skin Tune off if you do not want Perfect Portrait to do any color correction. So that's really the only thing that you'd, the reason why you'd want to turn it off. For me, I prefer the starting point here. I'm actually going to bring the warmth up a bit, just to warm it up just a bit. And I'll go over what these sliders do in a minute. So now that I've refined, or I've used the retouch brush, now it's time to start refining the mask. And so watch. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring the skin mask up first. And the skin mask is, it's a brush. These three icons, the silhouette, the eye, and the mouth, those are brushes. And you can see, I'm not brushing anything right now, but you can see that it's a brush. So what I want to do is I want to refine the skin first. And so the easiest way to show you this is if I bring up the inspector. So I selected the silhouette right here. And then I brought up the inspector, which is this icon, the little eye right here. And then I go to the show mask and I go to overlay. And so this shows what was detected for the skin. And so you can see here, I want to actually get a little bit of that part of her face. You see what I'm doing? I'm refining the skin. And so I'm going to kind of get above the eye over there And notice how it didn't detect the eyes or the mouth. It only was looking for the skin. One thing I want to do is, because her hair color is so similar to her skin color, I want to remove this little swatch of hair that was selected. And to do that, I just change the painting mode from paint in to paint out, and I'm going to mask out that area because I don't want to smooth her hair. I'm going to go here, and I'm also going to paint out the little part of her neck right down here. Now, without doing anything else, I'm going to switch over to the eye. I'm not going to turn off the mask. And now I'm going to refine the eye. So you can see here, the eyes are selected. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure I'm set to paint in. And I'm going to just draw on the eyes. And then switch to the mouth and do the exact same thing. The mouth needs a little bit of retouching for the mask. So I'm just going to paint on the mouth. Get the lips. And then you see I painted out a bit too much. I'm going to change my mode to paint out, fix that selection, and then also just get this nostril that was selected. I want to get that out. Now I can turn the mask off, and my masks are refined. So why did I do that first? Well, let me explain. If you were to look at these three icons, skin, eyes, and mouth, the skin icon, that mask, correlates to these sliders over here. Skin retouching. The eyes correlate to these sliders, the eyes. And then the same thing for the mouth. The mouth correlates to the mouth. Now, Steve asks a great question. Steve's asking, how exact do the strokes need to be? Actually, Steve, you don't have to go nuts. And I'm so glad you asked that question. The technology in the sliders here is smart enough to know not to brighten certain things. For instance, we know what color range eyes typically are. We know what color range lips typically are, and same thing with teeth. So we're not going to affect. Let's say your mask accidentally goes into her, like the mouth mask has her the part of her chin selected. It's not going to whiten that because the slider for the mouth correlates to a certain color range. So let me know if that makes sense, Steve and Abel, if that answers the question. Yeah, okay, good. So now, like I was saying, let's start retouching. We've got 5 sliders here. Now, a lot of times when you're retouching, you end up with a result that looks like this, where the skin is porcelain. It doesn't look real because you're adding a lot of smoothing. And when we built Perfect Portrait, our goal was to be able to give you retouching tools that preserves the pore structure of skin. Everyone has pores, everyone. And that's what lends the authenticity when you're retouching. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the blemishes slider. The blemishes slider is really the money, in my opinion, for Perfect Portrait, because what this allows you to do is gives the, if we zoom in a bit, let me just zoom in a bit here and center out. I just want to give you guys a better look. It's a bit too close. Getting a bit too intimate with our model. There we go. Okay, so watch again. I'm going to turn the blemishes off, and as we increase it, what it's doing is it's healing the skin without removing any pore structure. And so usually for me, I find that a good starting point for blemishes is between 45 and 50%. And what this allows me to do is use only a small amount of smoothing. Smoothing is good. Smoothing is very important for skin retouching because it adds a nice healthy glow. If you look, between this left and this right, you can see it has a nice healthy glow. And if you want, you could bring that up. Usually for smoothing, I don't really ever exceed 20%. Now notice how the eyes are still tack sharp, and so is the mouth. And that's because the mask that we're working on for these sliders is only affecting the skin. Now there are 3 other sliders here. There's shine, shadow, and texture. The shine slider is a shine recovery, so if there are hot spots on the model's face, if you increase the shine, it's not very, because she doesn't have too many hot spots, it's not very noticeable, but it minimizes the highlights. And so if you kind of want to kind of reduce the brightness on the face, you would increase the shine. In this case here, I'm not going to do that. The shadows is for the opposite. If there are some heavy shadows on the face and you want to bring out the detail, you'd increase the shadow slider. But again, her face is properly exposed, so we don't need that. Now, texture. Texture is used in the event that you're retouching a portrait where the skin is just really bad. I mean, the skin is rugged. And you have to apply a lot of blemishes and a lot of smoothing. By doing that, you end up getting that really fake look. By adding texture, you can kind of return some of that skin texture to the skin. Now, in this situation, we don't need it, but it's there if you do. Now again, under the skin tune, we have these overall sliders. We've got the strength slider. And then we also have warmth. So if you want to control how warm your portrait is, you kind of adjust it there. The color shift allows you to refine the hue of the skin color. So if you want to make a minor adjustment, this is basically a color range of the skin that was detected. Evenness. I'm trying to think of how to explain. Okay, so let's say you have a model that where their skin is splotchy, meaning you've got some different color, you've got some splotchy skin, and you want the skin to have a more well-rounded look. You would increase the evenness slider, and that would take the mid-tone color of the skin, and it would apply it to the rest of the face. That's it. Alex, thank you, Alex. Kind of, I guess, deciphered it perfectly. Basically, and I agree with his definition. He says that evenness averages the color range detected to one flat color. Basically, that's what the evenness does. And again, because it's under the skin retouching panel, it'll only apply to this mask here if I turn it back on. It'll only apply to this. So only the face will actually get that evenness effect. Let me just turn this mask off. Okay, so I also skipped up here, and I apologize. This face only checkbox. I get this question asked a lot. In the event that you want these color corrections to apply to the whole image, meaning you want the softening to apply everywhere, you would deselect the face only. This checkbox basically confines all of the retouching to that bracket. So if I bring the we're too zoomed in. But basically, you remember how we had the face bracket? The face only checkbox confines the retouching to the face. So if we deselect that, it will apply the retouching to the whole image. So you can see her hair now got softer, and this is useful in the event that you want to create an overall soft look, like an ethereal glamour look. But for me, I'm going to keep it intact. Now, under the facial features, we've got eyes and mouth. So with the eyes, it's what you would expect. Basically, the whitening will brighten the eyes, and the clarity will add sharpness to the eyes. So there are two ways you can go about it. The way I like to do it is I like to have my strength at 100 and then adjust these two sliders accordingly. You can also do the opposite. You can have these two sliders at 100 and then drop the strength down accordingly. But the problem here is that this one slider will control these two sliders together, whereas if I have this at 100, now I have independent control of both of these sliders. So I'm going to drop that down a bit, but notice how our eyes really pop now. And then with the mouth, we'll increase the whitening there, and that brightens the teeth and the lips. And then vibrance adds a color boost just to the lips. And so you can see here, if we go to the full screen, the difference between the before and the after. Here's a great question, Anita. Anita asks this question. she was wondering, all right, well, if this is a female, do we need to have the female icon at the bottom here selected? No, not at all. These little tabs over here are presets. So we have pre-built presets here for you guys based on the model. If it's children, female, groups, male, and then mine that I built. So you don't; these are irrelevant unless you want to use a preset. Now Barry asks a good question too. It looks like I skipped over the correct scene. Under Skin Tune, there's a checkbox that says correct scene, and basically what this means is that when Perfect Portrait does the color cast removal in the face, it also does that same color cast removal to the entire scene. Now, if you only want the color cast removal to apply to the face only, and you want that original color casted image in the background to appear, you would deselect this. And it would basically restore the color cast so that this area here is now the same as this area. But if you select it, it'll actually apply that color cast removal to the whole image. Let's go ahead and go to Portrait so we can do our retouching. So here we've got our image. I'm going to go ahead and zoom. Let's turn the preview on, the dual screen preview, and then let's go to Window or View rather, and go to Fit to Face. So once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my presets. I'm going to go to the folder and I'm going to double click Zero It Out because that's going to zero out the entire image. Okay, so we've got our before and our after. We can close out this window here, and then I'm just going to pan over to the right a bit so the face is a bit more centered. And again, if you want to, because I had the Skin Tune off in my presets, in the preset, I'm going to toggle this on and off so we have control of it again. Okay. Oops, I hit it twice. So the first thing we're going to want to do is use the retouch brush. So just like before, you know, just kind of attack certain areas that you want to refine. Typically, you'll want to use a small brush because you don't want to create too many patterns, you know, smoothing patterns. If you localize it to kind of a dot or a small drag, usually the results are pretty good. But if you have a really long drag, you typically will end up with some sort of a pattern that you want to avoid. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just doing my retouching. And you can see how just by doing this, the before and the after is already looking really, really good. Now again, I mentioned that if I bring the inspector up and I drop the brush opacity of the retouch brush down to about 20, it does a really nice job of kind of smoothing out these areas here, any lines. And again, because it's such a low opacity, you can do it a few times without being too aggressive. Now, again, bring the skin mask up and show the mask. And now let's refine. So here, I want to paint in this part of her face, the area of the shadow that wasn't detected. And then let's paint out her neck. And then her hair up here. That was detected. There's a little bit of her hair that was detected. And then we switch straight to the eyes. Only the eyes were selected, so only the eyes are going to be refined. Now there are a few questions about the eyebrows. I don't use, if you want the eyebrows to get sharper, you can paint those in, because what would happen is it will sharpen the whatever's in the mask. So we can try this out. The nice thing about masks is that we can kind of remove the mask after the fact. And then let's switch straight to the mouth. And so the mouth, the selection is really good too. Just going to refine it. And then you can see how we have a little patch over here, so let's turn the paint in mode to paint out and just remove this area there. Now with the masking done, we turn the mask off and we can close the inspector. We don't need that anymore. Now it's time to basically play around. So again, blemishes slider, to about 50%. Now, if you look really closely, you can see we still have pore structure. Everything is looking great, but the skin just looks a little bit healthier. We can also add a little bit of smoothness. If we increase the shine, that reduces a little bit of the highlight on the bridge of her nose. So you can see it's a little bit less, it's a little bit softer. She doesn't have any shadows that I really want to bring out, and then she doesn't need any texture removed. Junmo, the texture slider increases texture to the skin. It doesn't decrease it because you're not going to use that very often. You'll use it primarily to if you had to be aggressive with smoothing, it would restore the skin texture back. You know, there was another image I wanted to work on here, and I don't see it. I don't know who's been messing with my folder, but I'm getting a little aggravated right now. So I apologize for that. Let me see if there's another image we can work on here. Let's do this one. So here we have an image again. Nice image, nice model, but we could stand to retouch a bit. So let's go ahead and send this image to Perfect Portrait. Bill, I am using a Wacom tablet. I use the Intuos 4 tablet. Barry's asking if there's a shortcut for changing the brush size. There is. I have it set on my Wacom, actually. I have the touch ring, so you can kind of see here, brush and feather. So I actually have a touch wheel that I can make so here I can make my brush big and small just by sliding on the touch wheel. But there's a keyboard shortcut, the bracket keys. And if you go to the Help menu and then go to Show Keyboard Shortcuts, all of our products have this now, so you can see brush size. Here are the brackets. So again, automatically some color correction was done, skin retouching was done. I don't want that. I'm going to go to my presets and I'm going to zero out. I think this is an important preset, and I actually think that we're including this as an option for future versions of Perfect Portrait. I honestly think, you know, it's important to start at 0. That's just my preference. So let's go ahead now. Everything's zeroed out. Let's toggle our skin tune. Tony, I'm using this as a standalone right now. I didn't launch it from Lightroom or Photoshop or Aperture. All right, so where were we? Oh yeah, I set this to the preview, and we zoomed in, and we brought the image centered. Okay, now we went to the retouch brush, and I'm going to bring the inspector up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start just kind of attacking certain areas. Now, again, she's got freckles on her face. I'm okay with that. I'm not necessarily going to remove the freckles. I'm just going to remove some of the areas that shouldn't be there. And I'm just kind of trying to be delicate with how much I'm using here, because I don't want to soften it too much. A lot of the freckles will still appear. That's part of her character, you know, but I would like to minimize them a bit. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and refine our mask. We'll go here, we'll go to Show Mask, and we'll go to Overlay. Now, this part of her face here, you can see on the left, is in shadow, so the color's different enough so that the algorithm didn't mask it in. It's not a problem, because all we need to do is just draw right through here and get her skin in there. Now, I'm also going to paint out, you see the top part of her hair is masked in because the color is similar, so I don't want that to necessarily be smoothed. And then here, back here, I can just kind of fix that up. And a little bit there. Now, I'll switch over to the eyes. Same thing, just kind of drag over the eyes. And then switch over to the mouth and drag over to the mouth. Make sure that we get the lips this time. Oops. Don't want that dot in the middle of her nose. Let's paint that out. And let's turn that off. All right, now we can start retouching. So again, blemishes slider to about 50%. and it starts minimizing the appearance of freckles. So it's starting to look good. And now we can kind of supplement that with some smoothing. So you can see now how the skin just looks so much healthier, but we still see pores. That's what's awesome about it. Now let me toggle the skin tune because I actually want to cool off the image. The image is a bit too warm for me. So I'm going to drop the warmth. That's too much. She looks like she's a corpse. There we go. Getting some nice natural skin color. And then the eyes, let's increase the eyes. See how only the eyes are being affected? And let's jack up the clarity. I'm actually going to drop that down. You see she has a lot of, her eyes are a little veiny, so I'm not going to, I can't, if I mask out that part of her eyes, then the whitening will go out with it. So you kind of want to be careful. I'm also going to bring up the whiteness of the teeth and then the vibrance so that the lips get a little bit richer. And so you can see the difference, the before and the after. It's really compelling. Why don't I do the neck and chest, Kathy's asking. I can, so watch. Let's zoom out. If I wanted the rest of the image to have the same correction, all I need to do is deselect face only. And that will apply those corrections to the entire image, including her hair, including her ears, and including the neck. So it's up to you. Now notice it does not apply to the eyes and to the mouth. The eyes and the mouth are controlled by these. Can you feel the hole in her ear? You know, Don, it's funny you bring that up. I can't. She has the freakiest hole in her ear. She clearly had, you know, a little one of those little pegs in her ears. And it's so disconcerting. And I usually don't touch it. Let me turn the faces. Let's turn the faces only on, and then we'll fix it and then see if it's any better. But yeah, you could try. Like what I could do here is with the retouch brush. Draw over that, and that does heal it. Does a decent job of healing it. Actually, I don't like that. Let's just draw that there. So, you know, and we can probably try a few different strokes over here, and it's lightening it up a bit. So yeah, you could do that. And this brush is also good for flyaways. I saw there was a question earlier of how to get rid of flyaways. So like there's a flyaway right here. So I think if we drag on this, it gets rid of the flyaways really nicely. So it kind of tightens up the hair. There's one right here. And there's one right here. So that's a good job of getting rid of flyaways. What does the opacity do to the ear after you've adjusted it? Nothing. The opacity slider is not retroactive. So if I drop the opacity to 0, it's not like it's going to take all of the selections and drop it as well. It's only once you make the adjustment, then it'll apply to all the strokes going forward. So right here, if you look really closely, there's just some like a little bit of a light hair. So that's another good example where drop the opacity and then just make these strokes and just soften it up a bit. Now, there's another cool thing. I want to show you a trick here. It has nothing to do with retouching the face, but it's still a portrait trick. And I always like bringing it up because I think it has a lot of merit. We'll do 2 examples of this so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. I think, where was the image? Is it under focal point? What I want to show you here is, this cute little girl. Sweet little girl. What I want to do here is I want to draw the attention only to the face. And I'll show you, it's a cool trick. I don't know how many of you actually use this. But if you go into focal point, so focal point is under blur. I'm going to click here and watch what we're going to do. Let's reset our settings here. Now, focal point has our focus bug, which is this little critter here, and by default it's round. Now, 99% of the times when you guys and girls watch me use focal point, I change my bug from round to planar. I always work on a planar bug. But in this case here, I actually want a round bug. So check this out. let's change the shape of the bug from back to round. And I'm going to adjust the mask, the focus bug here, so that it's about the shape of her face. Don't worry about being exact. But so you can see here's the general shape of the face. And I adjusted it by using these solid colored legs. Now, what I want to do is I want to increase the feather. The feather controls the transition. So watch, if I go to 0%, you have no transition, so you have this hard line. What I want is the total opposite. I want 100% feather. So what I did here was I put the bug over her face with 100% feather. So if we click on the Show Mask button under Focus Brush, you can see it's a nice soft transition. Now what I want to do is this. The key to focal point is the subtlety. So watch, I'm going to drop the amount of blur to about 9, even less, maybe even like 7. Let me type it in because it's hard to get it with the slider. There. So 7% of blur. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that her face is in focus because you can see her eyes are kind of in focus. I can do that with the focus brush at the bottom here. I'm going to go up to the focus brush palette and I'm going to make sure I'm set to paint focus at 100%. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw on the face. I want to make sure that the face, the mouth, everything here is in focus. Now when I get further out, I'm going to drop the opacity of my focus brush. And I'm going to start drawing along the cheeks and the jawline. And I'm not going to get it totally in focus. But I just want a little bit along the hairline and down here. So I'm just bringing that into focus some more. Now, what I can do is, the way the eyes work when it looks at an image is that the eyes will go to the brightest, sharpest thing first. So the brightest thing and the thing that's most in focus. So we're taking care of making sure that the face is most in focus. You can see here if we show the mask, we're kind of creating our mask around the face. Now let's make sure that it's the brightest. And so under the options palette, if I drop down the brightness, it's going to start darkening everything that's out of focus. And if I bring up the contrast, it does the same thing. So I'm going to brighten up just a bit, but notice how we went from this cute little image, cute little girl, to that where her face just pops out. And your eyes go straight to her eyes because they are the brightest, sharpest things on the image. So it's a really cool little thing. Where's the focus brush, James? It's right down here. Along the bottom here, it's the brush. The bug will give you control of the bug again. So if you want to reposition it. And so there was a question as to what's happening to the mask. William, here you go. If I show the mask basically, everything that's black here is in focus. Everything that's white is fully out of focus based on the amount that you have here. So even though it's pure white, it's only blurring to 7%. And then these grays are the transition areas where we're restoring focus. So it's kind of a cool little trick, and I'll show you another example of it. Can I show this side by side? Yeah, where's my, wait, does focal point have that? I can't remember. I don't think focal point has a before and after. We can do the before after here. There's 1, there's 2. So before, there. And so William asks a great question. Does the focus brush overwrite the bug? Yeah, in a way it does, William. Basically, you use the bug as your starting point, and then you bring the feather up to create this really smooth transition. Then you drop the amount of blur so that it's, because here's the thing, watch, even if I bring this up to like 12, now it doesn't look real. We only increased it by 5%, but look how fake it looks. Whereas if we drop it back down the amount, or I did it to 13, but you get my point. If I go to 7, oops, or even less, you can even go to probably something like 5%. And it's still totally believable. It looks actually like you shot it with like a 1.2 or a 1.4 aperture, because the eyes and the nose are in focus, but then it quickly drops out of focus. Would I take this to portrait, Stephen? No, I don't really. I could. I can just hit apply right now, and then bring it to portrait. Let's say if I wanted to brighten her eyes, I can do that. So there it detects her face. I'm going to go ahead and go straight to the eye mask. Well, first I'm going to zero everything out, because I don't like any changes to my image. And then when that's done, let's bring up the eye mask. And so here it did a pretty good job again of detecting eyes. I'm just going to refine it a bit. Just change the paint out, get rid of this area, and then just kind of that area there. Let's hide it. And then we can kind of go to the facial features, brighten the eyes, and increase clarity, if that's what we want. We can also add a tiny bit of skin smoothing. And so let's hit apply. And so we're able to, then you can see how it comes in as its own layer. What about vignetting? Nah, I don't really vignette too often, but if I did, I actually I don't use the vignette tool in focal point. I prefer the vignette tool in Lightroom. That's not my daughter, James. I don't have any kids. I'm not sure who this is. I think this is an image we got from iStock. I think. I'm not 100% sure. Dennis is asking if after I apply the effects in Perfect Portrait, do I lower the opacity of that layer? No, I don't. There are certain layers that I don't really ever adjust the layer opacities of the products. Like focal point, you don't want to do that. It doesn't look good when you drop the opacity of focal point. You really want to adjust that opacity in the application. So I don't know if that makes sense. But I'll give you an here. Let's do another example where the same technique is applicable, and it gives me an opportunity to. Someone asked what highlight bloom is. So let's go ahead here. This is an image taken by Scott Stolberg at Carnival. So let's go to focal point, and we're going to repeat the process. I'm going to go ahead and reset once it gets into focal point. I'm going to reset all of the settings. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the round bug directly on the face here. All right, I'm just kind of trying to refine my selection. There, that's good enough. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the feather up to 100%. And I'm going to drop the amount. Because what I want is I want your eyes to really go straight to this mask here. Now, that's even too much. Let's go to like 5%. There, that's looking great. That's looking awesome. Now, a few things. Whenever you render things out of focus and focal point that are bright, they become specular highlights. So these little beads here, if you look at the original, these kind of little pearls, if I want to accentuate them, so the question was, Andrea was asking what the highlight bloom does. If I want to accentuate them, I would increase the highlight bloom, and they increase all the specular highlights in your image. Now, you notice how if we zoom in here, you see the little shapes of these? Let's kind of center this. You see the shape? It kind of looks like an octagon. It basically mimics the shape here. So if I want to round this out, I would just take the curvature of my aperture and bring it to 100, and that makes them round. Conversely, if I wanted to make a star, I would bring it to 0, and now they all take these little shapes of stars. I can accentuate it even more. Watch, let's bring up the highlight bloom. And then let's change the sides of the aperture from 6 to 3, and I can make these triangles. So it's just kind of little funky things. I don't like that. I'm going to keep it as totally round. So let's kind of go back here. Let's drop this the highlight bloom because it's too strong. I don't want it I don't want that to take away from the rest of the image. Now, with that done, I'm going to take my focus brush. I'm going to set it to 100%. Let's drop the brush size, and I'm just going to make sure that the kind of the edge here of the mask, literally the actual mask, not the layer mask, is in focus. And I also want this jewel to be in focus. And by doing that, that gives me a nice three-dimensional feel. Just kind of, you want to be careful though, like with your mask, you don't want to paint focus into areas that you actually want blur. So that's looking pretty good. Let me get right up here some focus, and along the bottom of the mask, or of the rim of the hat here. And then again, let's drop the brightness, boost the contrast. So that's looking pretty damn cool. I'm thinking that's looking really awesome. You can see the before and the after. I mean, your eyes go straight to this mask. So it's a portrait tip that you can use when you're working with your actual portrait images. If you want to control where the, you can go to perfect portrait first and do your retouching, and then go to focal point to really draw the eye specifically to where you want it. Yeah, Patrick brings up a good question. He's asking, is 50-50 over here, 50 and 50 under the vignette, 0? Yes. 50 and 50 is 0, because watch, if I start going to 0, we're adding that vignette. So you can always hit reset. Very good question. Can you undo the focus brush if you've done too much? Absolutely, Andrea. So that's a good question. So let's say I don't want this top jewel to be as in focus. I want to paint back some of the blur. I'd take my focus brush, I'd go to the focus brush palette, and I'd press this button where it says paint focus to paint blur. Now here is, it's so important that you listen here. When you're painting blur, drop your opacity to about 10%. Never more than 10, because when you paint back blur, it's so aggressive. So watch, when I paint at 10%, it just has a nice soft blur. Whereas watch, if I paint it at 100, let me undo that stroke. Let me paint it at 100. You see how uneven that blur is? So you want to paint your blur very, very slowly, usually at about 10%.